I'm a better music person for it. I have a lot broader like of things that I didn't used to like. Hello everyone, I'm TC Kirkham, the Kirkham Report, and this is the show where I talk about the people and things that have been a part of my life that make me the musical person I am today. Welcome to Influencers. It's going to be a little bit different this week. I need to tell you a little bit of background about where I'm going today. In June of 1981, I was 18 years old and graduating from high school in a small town called Harrington, just southwest of Spokane, Washington. I had plans to go to broadcast school, but that had been upended by my mom and my aunt talking, and we decided to move back to Ohio because my grandmother was supposedly on her deathbed, a deathbed which apparently lasted another 25 years. Or almost another 15 years. 1999 is when she finally passed away. So I gave up my plans, which had been to attend a broadcasting school, because I was going to become a DJ. DJs was exactly what I wanted to do with my life. I'd been accepted to a couple of colleges and the Ron Bailey School of Broadcast, and I wanted to go to all of them, but I couldn't because of this arrangement. By this time, my life had been changing. In high school, I was a pop guy. And then a friend introduced me to our local FM rock station in Spokane, which at the time was KREM FM, K-R-E-M FM, 92.9 on the stereo dial. And they were my introduction to album-oriented rock. I'd never really listened to it that much before, unless they had a hit single. It was there, thanks to my friend Kenna Kay, that I became an avid fan of the Police, where I first heard Def Leppard, and a lot of new wave music. During 1980, my junior year in high school, sophomore and junior year in high school, no, I was a junior at that point, 1980 and 81, junior and senior. I was listening to a lot of new wave music. I had gotten into the B-52s. My mother could not understand my love for Rock Lobster. But in Washington, everything was still on AM. When we moved to Ohio in June, everything was on the FM dial. FM was top 40 and AM was all talk and easy listening and, big band stuff, news, farm news, and all the top 40 stations were on FM. That was quite a change for me. The whole world's musical tastes were changing at that point, and they got a big assist when on August 1st, 1981, shortly after midnight, a new television network went on, cable television. It looked like this.
Ladies and gentlemen, rock and roll.
MTV had been born, and a new generation of music lovers were about to be born as well. I'm going to spend this episode talking about my memories of the original MTV. And I'm not talking about all of it, because now, of course, MTV is still on the air. It doesn't mean music television anymore. That's what it meant originally. Um, but they haven't really played videos in earnest since the early 2000s. And that's more the pity because I miss those days of wanting to watch my favorite videos. Ironically, we wouldn't get MTV for almost a whole year after it debuted. When we moved from Newark to Lancaster, Ohio, and Lancaster already had it on their cable system, we did not have it in Newark. Um, the second I found MTV, I wanted to try it out, and I was entranced. And I wasn't working at the time, so here I was, 19, and lots of time on my hands. And what time wasn't spent upstairs listening to my collection, I was watching mostly MTV. I would become a news junkie later on, but MTV is where I spent most of my time. And those glorious first couple of years of MTV, they were something special. And they had a profound effect on the music industry. Nobody knew when it first took off how well MTV would do. Everybody was like, 24 hours of videos. Who's going to want to watch 24 hours of videos? Well, it turned out quite a few people, and by the end of the decade, MTV had over 80 million households and was still growing. MTV broke a lot of artists. They helped a lot of newcomers get radio airplay, which was still important at the time. Nowadays, I don't think radio airplay does much at all for music sales. But the best part about MTV were the VJs. They were doing what I wanted to do, except they were doing it on camera. There was Mark Goodman, the cool guy next door type that everybody loved. There was jockey Alan Hunter, who was kind of a sports guy, but also, good looking and hunky for the ladies. There was the sultry Nina Blackwood, who was aimed at the older guys in the crowd. There was veteran DJ J.J. Jackson, who brought air of authority and knowledge to the network. And there was the girl next door, Martha Quinn. Most of my time was spent with Martha for the next couple of years. Martha was on in the afternoons, which is why I saw her most of the time. And I admit I had a tiny crush on her. I was 19. She was quite something. But more to the point, this had been the first time I'd really been exposed to the art of the music video. Now, it had been used in Britain since the 1960s, and I had seen when I was a kid, one of the local restaurants we used to go to in Spokane had a Scopatone music video jukebox, so I was able to see those. I remember playing Tijuana Taxi all the time. But MTV was music videos 24/7, 7 days a week. And it had a profound effect on my musical tastes. I started liking a lot more rock-oriented bands. Of course, they wouldn't start playing, other types of music in a big way because they were designed to be an album rock station on the air. They played mostly rock and new wave music, and only after Michael Jackson's Thriller broke that they really started playing other types of music. Those first couple of years were instrumental in breaking so many new acts, and not all of them were hugely successful. I found a few bands I loved that nobody took off. They regularly played a video called The Sound of Breaking Hearts by a band called Espionage. Went nowhere, but I loved the song, and I ended up actually getting into a slight tussle grabbing the final copy of the single from my local record store. I would later end up buying the album as well. It's very synth pop based stuff. I have a second album that's still on my Discogs list. I got into all different types of music that I didn't know. Now, they did play some rock-oriented music by people that were well-known. George Thorogood, Billy Joel, and a few other ones. But most of the acts coming through, unless they were heavy metal acts I'd been exposed to in other mediums like AC/DC and Def Leppard, I really didn't know a lot of them. So MTV was a large musical education for me. It was my college that I had attempted to go to. I wouldn't get to fulfill my DJ dreams until the 1990s, but MTV helped fill in the gaps on all the way on how I became interested in knowledge and history of music, in addition to what I listened to. Some of the artists that broke big on MTV were amazing. Now, they launched MTV with a song that I had already fallen in love with. I had started to find new wave stuff on Creme FM, and the Buggles' Video Killed the Radio Star couldn't have been a more appropriate song to launch MTV with. It wasn't a big hit in America, but it had hit #1 on the Kirkham Report chart, and in fact was the #1 song of 1980 for that year on my chart. Loved that song and always will, and it was the perfect song to start things with. They rolled it into another great song from Pat Benatar, You Better Run, and then they were off and running with Mark Goodman on that first night, and there was no looking back. MTV helped break a lot of acts that may or may not have broken had MTV not existed. And it helped that a lot of the acts concentrated their music on being photogenic, telling a storyline or just looking good in concert or whatever. I think the first band to really benefit from MTV was Duran Duran. Duran Duran had been around for about a year in Britain and had a couple of hits, but it was when the video for Hungry Like the Wolf premiered in 1982 that Duran Duran really took off in America. The video was stylish, it was fun, the song was great, and it helped propel Duran Duran into becoming what is now a legendary pop new wave band of the 1980s. Still together, still doing stuff every now and then, and still sounding as great as ever. Another band that they broke in a big way was Def Leppard. Def Leppard had only started to get a little bit of rock inroads on FM radio. Their first album, On Through the Night, didn't really take off, but Creme FM played quite a bit of it, and that's where I became a fan. But Bringing On the Heartbreak had gotten a lot of airplay, and so they were running the video for that and a couple of the earlier songs. And then, of course, when Pyromania came out and Photograph was released, Def Leppard shot straight to the top of the charts. They've been there again pretty much ever since. They just had a new album come out a few months ago, and still rocking, still better than ever. Although we miss Pete Willis and we definitely miss the late Steve Clark. Believe me, Phil Collin, Phil Cohen is in the Hardy Boys. Phil Collin and Vivian Campbell have filled in those gaps. They were hard to fill in, too. Def Leppard's Bringing On the Heartbreak broke out huge. Other bands that MTV broke in a big way were Men at Work with their debut single, Who Could It Be Now, and follow-up Down Under. The videos were in constant rotation on MTV. There was Naked Eyes and Always Something There to Remind Me, which really I loved. I liked that song anyway when Dionne Warwick had a hit with it when I was a little kid. I loved Naked Eyes. Have all their stuff in my collection too. And Kajagoogoo. I wanted Limal's two-toned hair. He looked so cool. And I loved Too Shy. Although White Feathers, the album, is great. Like Duran Duran, sometimes the lyrics make absolutely no sense at all, but they're great music. And the videos became stylish as well. I mean, some of them were just straight performance videos like Def Leppard and stuff. But as the decade moved on and we got into hair metal and bands like Autograph and Rat and Motley Crue, things got really crazy with the music videos. And there were other acts that did well, but nobody did as much business as Michael Jackson. Once MTV started running R&B, heavier leaning R&B songs, it became commonplace to see Michael, Prince, and a few other acts on MTV. Marvin Gaye's Sexual Healing comes to mind also. Michael, of course, had already hit pretty big with The Girl Is Mine and Say, but when Billie Jean broke out as the first single from Thriller, and then Beat It, and then the huge premiere of John Landis's produced and directed Thriller video, there was no going back, and it was clear that MTV was now the dominant force in music. people were watching MTV more than they were listening to the radio. I know I was. I would often sit every afternoon in the living room watching Martha Quinn for a couple hours. Sometimes Alan or Mark or one of the other VJs would be on. They'd be rotating them in and out. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the interaction. We didn't know it wasn't live. They were all pre-taped segments, but it felt like that they were talking to you. And that was fun. It made it work. And that's why MTV succeeded, because it connected with its audience. Its primary audience was aimed at the 12 to 34 age group, but most of its demographics were in the 12 to 24 age group. And those age groups were real big record buyers back then. I know, because I was in that group. If it wasn't for MTV, I wouldn't have bought a lot of the stuff I bought. Not just singles, but albums by these artists I've talked about already, plus other acts. I mean, Michael Jackson and Paul McCartney were givens, but you had Prince really starting to break loose then. MTV enabled him to have the power to do Purple Rain in 1985, which became a major sensation, and it itself inspired by MTV. Its look, its feel, the drive behind it. Purple Rain, just one of the greatest rock films of all time, and it just feels like MTV. Now, they made a few tweaks here and there along the way, and more music video shows kept debuting. NBC debuted Friday Night Videos, canceling the venerable Midnight Special to air videos, which seemed really stupid to me at the time. TBS premiered Night Tracks because they also tried to compete for a while with a channel called Cable Music Channel, which lasted all of 30 days before Ted Turner sold it to MTV and helped them grow even bigger. There was Night Flight on USA, which showed a mix of videos and performance art stuff and Japanese serials and bad movies. There were syndicated shows. In Columbus, Ohio, for the summer of 1983 or 84, we had a show called Music Machine, hosted by Julie Brown, who was the lead singer for the band Snapshot. It was on every afternoon at 4 o'clock for about 3 months. Didn't go very far or last very long. Here in Boston, Kim has vivid memories of V66. I talked about a movie they made about V66 on an episode of Rockin' Reviews a couple months back. V66 was a 24-hour music video channel based in Boston. It only lasted about 14 months, I think, but it was a noble experiment, and it was a lot of fun, too. I can see why she enjoyed watching it. As you watched MTV, a lot of these people became friends. You felt like you were welcoming in your next-door neighbors, Martha and Mark, for, a soda and to hang out and talk music and watch music videos. Somebody like J.J. Jackson, he was the professor. He would school you on what was going on. Alan Hunter would bring in the girls, and the guys liked him too, because he seemed very much like a jock and very much enjoyable. And Nina Blackwood, she was nice on the eyes and had that soft, sexy voice that everybody loved. Nina would go on to Solid Gold when the MTV VJs were eventually traded out. Now, before the VJs left, they were joined by a couple of other people. Dweezil Zappa became a VJ in 1985. He would be on for about a year before bad-mouthing MTV about something and getting fired. He was 16, I think, at the time. And there were others slowly being brought in on the backside as the original VJs would leave or were not renewed. They would bring in Kevin Seal, Adam Curry, Caroline Heldman, and continue right on through the 1990s and the 2000s with VJs changing up all the time. But nothing quite captures those first 2 or 3 years of MTV. I mean, the whole slogan was, "I want my MTV." They had every rocker doing it. Billy Idol, Sting, Hall & Oates, everybody was doing, "I want my MTV." And they would run that on cable stations that didn't carry it yet. eventually MTV pretty much was in damn near every household in the country, and all the competitors fell by the wayside eventually. I used to get a kick out of Nick Rocks on Nickelodeon because they would show pop videos that nobody else would show. You saw the videos for acts like Menudo and Nolan Thomas and Warren Mills and Debbie Gibson and Tiffany over there, where they weren't playing on MTV originally. They would later when New Kids became a sensation. But those early days of MTV were so filled with discovery. Um, a lot of acts, like I said, made their name from MTV. I remain a Colin Hay fan to this day. Even though Men at Work has been broken up forever, he still tours, he still records, he still writes incredible songs. And I haven't picked up everything he's done, but I picked up his most recent couple of albums, and an album in the cut-up bin a few years ago, and I love them. They're fantastic. He does great stuff. And that all started from that goofy Who Could It Be Now video on MTV in the fall of 1983. MTV was magic to a new generation, and it was a different style of music listening because you got to look at it as well as listen to it. It was more interactive than the radio. You thought there were creative stuff, and the videos were getting more and more and more outlandish. I mean, when you look at something as simple as Def Leppard's Bringing On the Heartbreak, and there's two different versions. There's a stage performance one, and then there's a staged one, the one where Steve Clark's halfway up the oil tower. Those are great. But when you get into the later videos like Photograph and Foolin' and Rock of Ages, and there's all these imagery pounding at you saying, we're great. This is a great band. You've got to watch this. You've got to listen to this. It's one of the reasons I became a Leb head, and I remain one to this day. Creativity knew no bounds. You'd see Golden Earrings Twilight Zone, for example, which is a whole spy story in 3 minutes. You had great, intelligent videos too, some of which were designed to educate you about the process of movie making, where somebody would do a video where it would be like making a movie in the background, or the kind of creepy air of Always Something There to Remind Me, where this reporter is following this actress that he apparently may have dated at one point all over, making it very much a stalkery type of song. Way less tame, way tamer than Every Breath You Take, which will come out later. But those early videos, and a lot of them, I remember a video called Norman Bates. I think the band was called Landscape. I still remember the video of it. I never saw Psycho until earlier this year. Just little ones that you see every now and then. I mean, constant rotation for me. In addition to those acts, Billy Joel's Pressure and Allentown were on all the time. There were some of the acts I didn't care for. I was never a big Talking Heads fan. I like selected songs by them, but David Byrne and his Once in a Lifetime video drove me up the wall. My mother was like, "What is that man doing? Oh my God, what is that? What are you watching?" You know, it's like, okay, I don't know how to explain David Byrne. How do you explain David Byrne? He's the David Lynch of music. It was a lot of fun, though. And mostly, there was Martha. Martha Quinn, who was only 23 at the time she started doing this stuff, was the it girl for MTV. She became a major star, parlayed it a little bit into an acting career later as part of the Bradys. She became Bobby Brady's wife in the updated shows they did on CBS. She was later back on MTV after leaving for a while, hosted a show called Rockline, also did a radio show or two, which is where she started. And Martha was always fun. She was funny, she was talented, she was very pretty, I admit that, and I enjoyed getting information about my favorite music videos from Martha Quinn. None of the other ladies ever clicked with me. I liked Carolyn Heldman later on, but I wasn't enamored with her the way I was with Martha. And I never got into Nina Blackwood that way either. Nina was like the worldly older sister that you could listen to, not the other girl next door you like think about asking on a date. Yeah, I was a weird guy back then. Eventually, MTV, like so many cable networks, started tinkering with its format. They would introduce other shows. First off, the big Video Music Awards, which is still going strong, but you know, a lot of it didn't really have to do with music. Some of them were good. The Real World was one of the best shows to ever premiere, at least the first 2 or 3 seasons. After that, I lost interest. There were other weird things here and there along the way, like Beavis and Butthead, which you couldn't help but watch every now and then. But nothing was like the original days of MTV. All the acts that I was nuts about were on there at the time. And I had grown. I had grown into a more rounded musical person because of MTV. I wasn't limited to teen idols and pop and ABBA and the Carpenters anymore. I was getting into new wave. I was into alternative rock of sorts, finding all these great synth pop bands like Duran Duran, Kajagoogoo, A Flock of Seagulls, Thomas Dolby. One-shots that didn't do well in the States that were huge in Europe, like Nick Kershaw, who I remain a huge fan of to this day, and Howard Jones, who was the flavor of the couple years here before falling out of favor, but still recording and still doing great stuff. I loved my MTV, and I think everybody else did too. Of course, now I don't know why they don't just change the name of the network to the Ridiculousness Network, because that's all they run. Pretty much, you know, there are certain cable channels that run certain shows nearly 24 hours a day. One of them's Law and Order, another one's NCIS, and pretty soon one of them's going to be the Golden Girls, I'm sure, and MTV is Ridiculousness. Not to say that show isn't funny, it is. It's a riot. But it's overdone. There are other smaller networks that MTV still has on a lot of digital cable systems. Nobody really watches them because they're just not fun anymore. The fun was in the newness. The fun was in the originality. The fun was in the 5 funky DJs you fell in love with. VJs, excuse me. And later on, I liked VH1 as well. I didn't have it till I moved to Boston, but I liked it as well. It played adult contemporary stuff. But without VH1, I would have never discovered Lauren Christie's Steep or Joshua Caddison's Jesse either. And I love both of those songs. MTV will always be a part of history. And anyone who grew up in that generation is always going to consider MTV as an influencer, because you couldn't help it. It was going in and out of your head, through your eyes, all the time. If you laid eyes on MTV for a half hour, chances are good you bought something you saw. I did. Most of this stuff back here came from the MTV era. And I'm a better music person for it. I have a lot broader like of things that I didn't used to like. I wish the music video channels were back the way they used to be. I'd love to see this generation growing up with them. But they get their music videos on YouTube and TikTok, so they're not totally without them. They just watch them in a different format. But there was something magical about Alan and Mark and Martha and Nina and JJ that just can't be recreated. It was a product of its time, the early 80s, the Reagan era. It was a time when we were coming out of a crazy decade known as the 70s and moving into a decade that would look a lot future, and by the end of it would look a lot different than it did when it began. Not just on the musical landscape, but on a worldscape as well. A lot changed in the 80s, and MTV was a big part of that. Martha, Mark, Alan, Nina, and the late JJ, my cup is up to you and everybody behind MTV. I wanted my music television, and I still do. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel if you like what you see. I've been really fortunate with my current contest to get such great numbers, and I thank everybody. I cannot believe how well this contest has been bringing in people, and I hope everybody likes what they see. And I hope you'll leave a comment. I love talking to you, and it sometimes takes me a couple of days to get back to everybody, but I do get back to everybody eventually. If you're part of the contest, if you're watching this while the contest is going on, it runs through August 13th. All you need to do is make a video with your 10 obscure records or tapes that you own that you think nobody else in the VC has, and you can enter for my prizes. I got a $100 gift card, $50 gift card, $25 gift card, and some other goodies to give away. And it all stops on August 13th at midnight, so make sure you get your entry in by then. And don't forget to check out my other shows on the Kirkham Report channel, which my daily show, Daily Obscuria Vaults, Monday through Friday at 11 a.m., plus other shows throughout the weekend. I do have a special coming up later this week. I hope you will check it out as well. For influencers, I'm TC Kirkham, the Kirkham Report. I want my MTV. I'll see you later. Ciao, baby.